Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As we know, happy International Women's Day. Thank you all for being here today and joining us on this webinar. We're excited to share a lot of stories, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of wisdom between the amazing women we have settled up today in our panel. So without further ado, I will pass it on to Ashaki, who will give us our welcoming remarks.
My name is Ashaki Binta, and I'm a longtime organizer with Black Workers for Justice and our Women's Commission working group, and also with the Women United Against Genocide organization, and a number of us in various organizations. You'll see on the flyer the list of us, but a number have come together to convene this recognition of International Women's Day this afternoon. It has been 162 years since Harriet Tubman led the victorious Combahee River raid across South Carolina that freed nearly 800 slaves in a carefully organized military campaign, destroying the Confederacy in that area of South Carolina. Tubman was the first woman to lead a military campaign in the United States in 1863. In June of 1866, the Black washerwomen of Jackson, Mississippi, organized the first trade union in that state and took their demands to the mayor of Jackson for higher wages at a uniform rate. With this, they launched a wave of organizing campaigns and strikes of Black labor in the South during the following years, even on into the Reconstruction era. And these struggles emerged in Virginia, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, South Carolina, and Washington, D.C. Out of that movement came the Colored National Labor Union in 1869, and more strikes of workers followed across the country in many key industries, not just among the Black community. It has been 116 years since the shirtwaist factory, where Jewish and immigrant women workers in New York led a strike of 20,000 garment workers demanding higher wages, safer working conditions, and shorter working hours, sparking the founding of International Working Women's Day in 1909. Though the strike was massively successful and led to collective bargaining in the garment industry, only 2 years later in Manhattan, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire killed 144, mostly teenage young women workers in 1911. Even though factory owners were warned about the unsafe working conditions in the factory, the exits and doors were locked, supposedly, quote unquote, to prevent stealing. 80 years later, after that, in Hamlet, North Carolina, 25 workers were killed in a fire at the Imperial Foods chicken processing plant in that town. 18 of those workers were women, and over 200, mainly women workers, lost their jobs. The workforce was majority Black, and again, the plant owners have been warned of safety violations and concerns in that plant, but the exits were again locked, supposedly to prevent workers from stealing chickens, but what it prevented was their escape from tragic death. As we learn from our speakers tonight of the current imperative struggles against our oppression, there are many historic women who led revolutionary and organized movements to win freedom for their people. We honor and remember them, such as Suzanne Belair and Marie-Jeanne Lamartiniere of Haiti, both soldiers and strategists in the Haitian Revolution in the 18th century. In 1954, the great Lolita Lebron was among 4 Puerto Rican nationalists who struck a blow for national liberation and independence for the people of Puerto Rico at the U.S. Capitol. She became one of the famous 5 Puerto Rican nationalist prisoners along with Albizu Campos, a profound leader of Puerto Rico, who had earlier been imprisoned for inciting rebellion on the island against U.S. imperialism. Dolores Huerta is among one Latina woman, among others, who had led the fight for immigrants' rights, workers' rights, women's rights, justice, and human rights for immigrant families and workers from the community to the farm to the factory, immigrant workers. We also give honor to Lozen, an Apache woman warrior who fought the wars of annihilation and genocide against the indigenous nations by the U.S. imperialist state during the 19th and 20th centuries. Our struggle remains for Native nations to free themselves in the 21st century here in the continental borders of the U.S. The ongoing U.S. Zionist genocide in Palestine has displaced over 2 million Palestinians, and at minimum, likely a gross undercounting of the dead, nearly 50,000 have been murdered in Gaza alone, with figures as high as 70% estimated to be women, children, and the elderly. We give honor to the mothers, grandmothers, women leaders, activists, and organizers, and freedom fighters who continue to fight for the liberation of Palestine, and we stand with Palestine in its ongoing struggle. Let us also give homage to the women of Cuba, the great Cuban Revolution, and the many women, such as Celia Sanchez, a major organizer and strategist of the Cuban Revolution. Not everybody has heard of her, but women were the actual foundation of the Cuban revolutionary movement, which eventually prevailed in victory for the Cuban people. Today, we salute the courageous women farmers in India and all countries of Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean in the front ranks of the battle for their rights and against every attempt to make them disposable like trash. Working class women are the heart of all the many struggles taking place. They are indispensable in bringing into being the new world that is so much needed, so much wanted, and which is coming into being despite all attempts to hold it back. As we give reverence to the long, concrete, and glorious history of women in the struggles for liberation against the forces of slavery, colonialism, patriarchy, capitalism, imperialism, and genocide, this common historic concern remains. Despite the leadership of women and the struggles of women in every sphere, the question of our lack of political power and continued economic exploitation remains. The lack of recognition of our unpaid labor is a part of that economic exploitation. Everywhere, the conclusion is being drawn that having women place themselves at the heart of all decision-making in society is a major problem to be solved. We need to empower ourselves as decision makers to affirm the rights of all as human beings and to put an end to the crimes against humanity that we are witnessing today. Political power is key to changing the balance of forces and to end sexual abuse and violence, to end poverty, to end unjust wars and exploitation, to end male supremacy, conquest, and patriarchy. As women, we must step up our organized resistance, defiant and strong as we fight to improve the lives of our families, loved ones, communities, and our nations, and for a new society where all human beings can flourish and be free. Thank you.
Peace, everyone. My name is Imani Lawrence, and I'm an organizer with the Black Alliance for Peace, New York City, New Jersey Citywide Alliance. International Women's Day emerged as a day to challenge oppression and demand justice. The US empire, draped in the language of feminism and empowerment, has weaponized International Women's Day to justify its gangsterism. In Gaza, US backed Israeli forces have killed and displaced thousands of women and children, destroying homes, hospitals, and schools under the guise of security. In Sudan, US aligned forces and foreign interventions have fueled devastating civil war, displacing millions and leaving women vulnerable to sexual violence and starvation. In Puerto Rico, U.S. colonialism maintains a vice grip on the island, denying its sovereignty while also keeping it vulnerable to corporate takeover, displacement, and infrastructural failure. which puts women and children at the most vulnerable position in their society. In Haiti, US imperialism has propped up corrupt regimes, destabilized the nation, leaving women to bear the brunt of poverty, violence, and systemic collapse. The opening remarks you just heard grounded us by walking us through the incredible radical anti-colonial liberation struggles women have engaged in for centuries, beginning by honoring the liberated African ancestor Harriet Tubman. Women from the global south have been the laborers of colonial empire since before we were even considered human, and have struggled against those oppressive conditions for just as long. It's important that we see that we have a common struggle born out of a common enemy. Here in the Americas, we are battling an enemy that sees this region as its backyard, infringing on the sovereignty of peoples and nations of this region. If we're to struggle against these forces and dismantle Western imperialism and fight for a world where all women can live with freedom and dignity, we must expel all the nefarious forces of imperialism from this region. We must turn this region and eventually the world into a zone of peace.
I would like to share two quick quotes from our ancestor and mother, Sojourner Truth, when she said, "I sell the shadow to support the substance." And then she stood there in front of hundreds of people in Accra, Ohio, and gave the powerful speech, "And I, a woman," and really centering the fact that we, as women, are able to be, to do whatever, whenever, however we choose to, we want to. So to honor those who have come before us, we want to say thank you. We want to honor and respect. To Mother Anakaona, who fought against the first colonizers when they landed in Haiti, and when they took over the island, she resisted. She was one of the very first people to have been killed by the colonizers in 1592. So we honor her. And as we've heard from those amazing justice warriors and queens before I was speaking, and they spoke about the Haitian Revolution and the women who led that fight. And Gantoya, who is a Dahomey warrior who was kidnapped and brought to Haiti in chains, but turned those chains around and taught and trained Toussaint Louverture and those men who were able to fight. And understand that she was the woman warrior, the mother queen, who trained the army to fight. So we honor her for that. And so as we look into what's happening in Haiti right now, we acknowledge women who are leading the fight with Nupap Domi, like Velina Charlier and others who have been forced to flee Haiti and make their way to the United States. But they continue to fight because they refuse to be silenced, they refuse to give up, and they refuse to lay down the fight. So today we continue to honor them. The journey of Haiti as a woman, Haiti Thomas, gives us what we know today as freedom, liberty, not only for those in Haiti, but for people around the world. And Haiti, as a woman, continued to fight for freedom and liberation of all people. And today, she continues to pay for that price because she dared to be the first woman to say no against colonization and say no against slavery and enslavement of her people and all people. And we have to highlight what's currently happening in Haiti when we see women being raped, the genocide of people in there, the young girls and young women who continues to be abused. We want them to know that we hear them, we see them, we love them, and we will continue to fight with, for, and beside them. So to center the reality of the freedom fighters from Haiti and around the world, We will continue to push through. We will continue to stand on principle, and we will continue to make sure that others do not write our history, her story, our own stories. We must push through. And today, as I hear and I see and I feel your hearts and the pains of those around the world, we say we are here. We are here today to create a better world for those coming after us. And we are here. And we, women, and I, a woman, and she, a woman, and they, a woman. So as we continue to push through, I invite you to not allow the fear that is attacking immigrant women in the United States today. Do not allow the fear of people in power who are creating division within our communities. When we hear a president trying to revoke birthright citizenship, attacking pregnant women who are searching for safety and protection after they have been raped. When we live in a society around the world where women's life is not valued and genocide continues to be the order of the day. So on behalf and in the name of Haiti, the women of Haiti, the people of Haiti, all women around the world, I say we must continue to push through. En pile men chay palou, l'union fait la force. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on the colonialization of Puerto Rico. I entitle my statement, Puerto Rico's culture of resistance is in the DNA of its people. Puerto Rico has always had a history of a culture of resistance. This culture of resistance has confronted 400 years of colonialization by Spain and presently 127 years of colonialization by the United States. We inherited our culture of resistance from our ancestors, the first people, the indigenous Taino nation of the Caribbean. The Taino culture emerged in the Greater Antilles, and that was Cuba, Jamaica, Haiti, Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico. That's why there's a interconnection of the islands of the Caribbean in our histories. They were descendants of Arawak-speaking people that migrated from the Orinoco River of the region of South America thousands of years ago. So this notion that Puerto Ricans don't have a history is a falsehood. Our history is embedded for more than 2,000 years. The Taino people, our ancestors, called the land of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico was the name the Spaniards gave it, was Borinquen, and it's from the name Borinquen that we derived the word Boricua. And the Tainos were a matriarchal society. They were naturalist and egalitarian society. Gender equality existed in all aspects of their lives. In fact, their highest god, the god of fertility was Atabek. So even women were worshipped for their power to give birth and to fertilize the land for their food. So in the Taino society, women were chiefs. They were called cacicas, and they reigned in their particular villages called yucayeques. So their leadership was not based on power as we know it today, but on responsibility and love for the people. Taino life came to a halt during the conquest, invasion, and colonialization of Spain from 1493 to 1897, after mass exploitation and stripping of its abundant natural resources. The Tainos did wage a movement of resistance that we still carry in our DNA. Not all was lost or suppressed. We carry our Taino heritage in our language, in our music, in our food, and in every aspect of our culture still today. Puerto Rican people, we're a mixed people, and we're so privileged to have also acquired the blood of resistance from Africa, Haitian African Republic influence, and provided military assistance to Simón Bolívar, the great Latin American liberator in the wars of liberation from 1810 to 1824, freeing six countries in South America. Today they're called Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador. The women of Puerto Rico have played a vital and pivotal role in the liberation of our people against foreign intervention, occupation, and colonialization. We have, for example, Mariana Bracetti and many others who led the Centro Bravo, the Brave Center, which is an underground movement in Puerto Rico from Spain, where the revolt in the town of Lares of September 23rd of 1868 declared the first republic of Puerto Rico. We have a Blanca Canales that led the revolution in Jayuya in 1950s, Puerto Rico's mountain town, where the U.S. Air Force bombed the town. We have Lolita Lebron, who was a factory worker in the garment district in New York City that led the armed commando to Washington, D.C. in 1954, denouncing mass repression, mass incarceration, and an end to U.S. colonialism in Puerto Rico. In the 1960s to the 1980s, prompted the formation of armed clandestine organizations to free Puerto Rico from the island archipelago and within the U.S. In the U.S., we had the Fuerzas Armadas de Liberación Nacional, the FALN, and in Puerto Rico, we had the Macheteros and 4 other organizations. All members were from the working class. The names of our working women, freedom fighters, Dilcia Pagan, Alicia and Lucy Rodriguez, Carmen Valentin, Alejandrina Torres, Lucy Segarra. For them to fight for independence is an inalienable right of colonized people, and this is recognized by international law. See Resolution 1514-15, which was passed in the 1960s. These are a few of the Puerto Rican women promoting the cultural resistance. Puerto Rico, under colonial rule, has experienced strategic attempts to eliminate our people, constituting ethnic cleansing and genocide. The U.S. imposed U.S. citizenship through the Jones Act of 1917 because Puerto Ricans were not consulted, nor did they give their consent. This resulted in the drafting of 18 to 26-year-old males to fight in U.S. wars, and Puerto Rican men have constituted cannon fodders and died in disproportionate numbers in the wars, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Gulf War, Middle East. The United States created in Puerto Rico 17 military bases and instilled a military government from 1898 to 1950. The military presence was intended to repress all aspirations of liberation, but also to have a stronghold and hegemony in the Caribbean and in Latin America. U.S. launched numerous invasions to sister nations from Puerto Rico without the consent of the Puerto Rican people. Mass sterilization of children, childbearing Puerto Rican women was conducted in Puerto Rico from 1940s to the 1970s. Under U.S. colonization, Puerto Rican women have been a specific target of genocide. This strategy involved the industrialization of Puerto Rico, called Operation Bootstrap, destroying Puerto Rico's agricultural economy and prompting cheap labor source, which forced the largest migration of Puerto Ricans from Puerto Rico to the U.S. and for women to be part of the garment industry. This imposed repressive apparatus that we have in Puerto Rico, military apparatus, involved also the creation of U.S. largest naval base in Vieques, Puerto Rico. And in Vieques, The United States used it for 60 years for war games and practices, and also rented it out to NATO nations, killing people, destroying the ecology of Vieques, and this also resulted in mass demonstrations and resistance against the U.S. During the time the Navy was in Vieques, the Marines raped Puerto Rican women and killed civilian population. In the 1950s, from 1948 to 1957, the United States imposed in Puerto Rico the gag law, the Ley de la Mordaza, which made it illegal for Puerto Ricans to display the Puerto Rican flag or advocate for independence. Under this law, thousands were arrested for advocating for Puerto Rico's independence. The Navy in Vieques destroyed the fishing industry, and it caused 45% of the population to get cancer. So these are just all the elements of genocide that has taken place in Puerto Rico and continue to take place. The United States prohibited the education of the history of Puerto Rico in public schools to foster a colonial mentality, and in destroying and demanding the dissolution of the public and university system by imposing also English only. So this is the battle that we have now on the fight that we have in Puerto Rico. So the working women of Puerto Rico are spearheading all the social justice causes. They constitute 60% of the population living below poverty level. The presence and leadership of women has been seen in mass mobilizations, for example, of the summer of 2019, where 1.5 million people took to the streets to oust the corrupt governor, Ricardo Rosselló. They're spearheading the environmental movement to protect the beaches, the coast, the flora, and the fauna of Puerto Rico. So we're fighting to free the land, to stop the mass displacement due to gentrification, to develop our own agriculture, to preserve our identity, language, and culture. And we have two fronts of struggle. The diaspora, 6 million Puerto Ricans that live in the diaspora, are fighting within the belly of the beast. Also in our communities here in the United States against gentrification of our communities, racism, sexism, and police brutality, in hopes to return to our homeland. We're fighting at all costs because we have a culture resistance that is embedded in our DNA. Que viva Puerto Rico libre, free Puerto Rico now, free Palestina now, free the land, Black liberation now, hands off Haiti, sovereignty for indigenous nations, and the blockade against Cuba, justice for immigrant groups, community, land and independence for all.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Viva Puerto Rico Libre!
¡Que viva Puerto Rico Libre!
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for this opportunity to let me speak today. I'm extremely honored to stand here with you among sisters, comrades, and all those who refuse to be silent in the face of injustice. I stand here before you as a Palestinian, as a revolutionary, and as a witness to the brutal realities of occupation, apartheid, and genocide. But most importantly, I stand here as a Palestinian Arab woman, as a fighter, one among millions who refuse to be erased. Palestinian women in Gaza and the West Bank do not just experience war and occupation as bystanders. We are the targets, we are the survivors, and we are the leaders of resistance. Pregnant women are being forced to give birth in unsanitary, freezing conditions, with no anesthesia, no medical supplies, and no doctors. C-sections are being performed without painkillers. Babies are being born into famine because their mothers don't have food to produce milk. But women in Gaza refuse to be defined as victims. They
define themselves as revolutionary intellectuals. They are first responders. They dig their children out from the rubble. They write, they speak with their bare hands and voices and bodies. They hold together shattered communities and continue to resist in the face of total annihilation, and yet they persist. They carry next generations. Even when the world wants these generations to disappear, they hold on, knowing that their survival itself is an act of defiance. Right now, Palestinian girls as young as 14 and 12 are being detained, beaten, sexually assaulted, and psychologically tortured in illegal Israeli prisons. Many are held without charges, simply for speaking out, for resisting, or literally for existing. Women are losing their homes. Entire families, led by mothers and grandmothers, are being thrown into the streets as Israel continues to demolish homes and expand their illegal settlements on Palestinian land in the occupied West Bank. And just a couple weeks ago, over 40,000 Palestinians were forcefully displaced en masse in the cities of Jenin and Tulkarem alone. And yet, again, we resist. Palestinian women in the West Bank are on the front lines of protests, protecting their communities, facing down soldiers with nothing but their bodies and voices. And Israel's violence does not stop at bombs and bullets. It targets our bodies and our very existence. Recently leaked Israeli documents have been showing that Israeli soldiers are encouraged to use rape and sexual violence as tools of war, just like settler colonial forces have done throughout history and on this land that we are currently in, just like a lot of other forces have been utilizing such strategies. Palestinian women prisoners have testified about sexual assault in detention, and Israeli politicians continue to openly call for the rape of Palestinian women. And in Gaza, Israel is killing pregnant women en masse at such high rates that the womb itself literally became a battlefield in the West Bank areas and also in the occupied 1948 areas. Palestinian women that have been detained are forcefully being sterilized. They're being denied access to reproductive health care, and these it's not something that is just currently happening or taking place recently. It's stuff that have been taking place for decades, almost for a century. It's documented in history, and it's a pattern that is still ongoing. But despite all of this, again, Palestinian women refuse to be silent. We document war crimes so the world cannot look away. We stand at the front lines of protests, fearless. We raise generations of resistance fighters, refusing to let occupation define us. We do not just suffer under occupation, we fight against it, and we will eventually win. Palestine. Recently, we've been seeing a lot of Palestinians rising from refugee camps to besieged cities, from the rubbles of Gaza to the streets of Ramallah, because our people resist through struggle, civil disobedience, art, poetry, writing, and steadfastness, what we call sumud. We fight in every way we can because surrender is not an option when the alternative is literally annihilation. And here in the US, the struggle continues. Students who dare to stand with Palestine are being targeted. Universities like UNC, where I'm currently at, suspend and expel those who speak the truth. Police brutalize protesters. Zionist organizations blacklist activists, and I've seen this happen to many of my friends. The same forces funding genocide in Gaza are also behind the oppression of Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities here. This is why we need to realize that our struggles are extremely interconnected. We cannot fight these forces alone, and we will not fight these forces alone. And I have been seeing unity, which has been making me extremely happy over the past couple months. I've seen Black and Palestinian organizers standing together in our campuses and in our streets. I see decolonial feminists and queer activists refusing to be divided. I see indigenous resistance linking our struggles from Palestine to Turtle Island. And this is our strength. This is because they want to isolate us, but instead we are, and we must build an unstoppable movement. You must make the cost of genocide unbearable to those who support it. You must speak up, especially in spaces where silence is expected. Speak up when it's deemed inappropriate. Support Palestinian resistance. Demand an arms embargo. Push for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. End U.S. funding to apartheid because it is your taxes that are funding my people's death. Resist this capitalist colonial empire in every way you can because it's your responsibility. Resistance is fluid and dynamic. It has many forms. Resist using art, resist using singing, resist by literally sharing stuff on social media. And literally recognize that it is your moral responsibility as a human. Protect student movements. Stand with those facing repression because if they come for one of us, they come for all of us. Amplify Palestinian voices. Do not let mainstream media erase us. Share our stories and name our martyrs. Refuse to use colonial vocabulary. Call this what it is: a genocide, a settler colonial power, and an apartheid regime. They want us to believe that power is theirs alone, but history proves otherwise. Every empire that has oppressed, occupied, and slaughtered has fallen. So colonialism will fall, apartheid will fall, and we must return eventually to our lands, and our liberation is inevitable. So we are here today because we refuse to be defeated. Women, defiant and strong, are leading this fight from Gaza to the streets of this very city. We are rising together as one people to reclaim our power that is meant for us, the people. And to end this, I want to commemorate Shadia Abu Ghazaleh, a Palestinian fighter, one of the first women to lead and organize women resistance unit throughout our resistance history, where she was literally the person that shattered gender roles to ensure that women's voices shaped our revolution. And she's just amazing. So before her martyrdom, she wrote in her diary that my true words have not ended. My words are the words of every free person and every fighter. Whoever seeks them will find them in the raindrops, in the streams of the night, in the fertile soil that I love. If you search for them, you will find them in the eyes of the innocent, the eyes of the children, all the children in my land. I am certain that these words will bring you a smile to your face, the faces of my loved ones, and that will bring me joy, great joy, and your tears will pain me just as your smiles delight me. So let's all remind ourselves that resistance is not about struggle. It's about unity and love. It's about protecting our land, our children, our pasts and future. Resistance is sacred. And so, in her honor, in the honors of all of our martyrs, all of our mothers, all of our revolutionaries that came before us and will continue to come after us, we will not stop and we will not break and we will win. So free Palestine.
Free Palestine.
My name is Shafia Mbalia. I'm also a member of Black Workers for Justice, director of the Communiversity, and a number of other organizations, including the Southern Regional Coordinator for the Imam Jamil Action Network. And it's my honor and privilege to be amongst the sisters, the women, the fighters today. I am so honored and so humbled. From its very beginning, it's very problematic to define the United States, struggles inside the United States, as domestic. Because the United States, what is now called the United States, has had such changing borders that are reflective of the peoples and the nations of peoples that it has suppressed, that it has the genocide that it has inflicted upon the indigenous people, the stealing of their land of indigenous people who were here first, of the trampling of indigenous peoples' treaties, as well as the slavery, the enslavement, the Atlantic slave trade, and the enslavement of millions of African people, their bodies, their labor, and their breeding. And many people do not talk about the question of the use of breeding by slave masters and to such a degree that it is part of the economic system of the United States, of the development of the United States. And so as we look at how the United States has developed, then you see that there are peoples and nations that it has suppressed and maintained inside that has then created
But you know what? Someone else
people and
sorted
nations within the borders of this empire, because it is suppressed and controls the flow and movement of who they call immigrants. But we must all remember that the only people who are not immigrants, whether willing or unwillingly, are the indigenous peoples, plural, who have inhabited this place that is now called the United States, that was called Turtle Island prior to. We are all the immigrants, whether willing or unwilling. But because of the super exploitation, the manipulation of people's inside, whether it is Black community primarily in the South, or the manipulation of economies of Mexico and Brazil and South America, where folks are whose countries' economies are destroyed, and therefore forcing people to come across the border seeking to live, to do the very things that everyone else wants to do, to save their families, to live in peace, to develop whole and healthy. And it is the United States that controls this inside as well as outside its borders. So that there is an integral relationship between the international struggles that we've just heard from, as well as those struggles that exist inside the borders of the national borders of this country, right? And those struggles are more than just social movements. They are struggles of peoples for democracy, for national liberation, for freeing the land.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much. Oh my God, a little bit of stage fright. Good afternoon. My name is Flor Saldivar. As was mentioned, I'm sorry, I came to the US at the age of 2. I'm originally from Mexico. I was mostly undocumented for most of my life, so I am a directly impacted individual. I think that women have always been at the forefront of struggles for justice, as ourselves, as everyone amazing persons connected today. We have often been part of struggles for justice, for equality, for human dignity. And I think now, even more in 2025, it's very, very much more urgent and a defining struggle. Because of, again, it's the fight that still continues to exist, that continues to grow at this point because of our new government, a fight in which women play such an indispensable role. Women immigrants, particularly those from marginalized communities, I think I was mentioned before, a lot of the aftermath or consequences that we're trying to, recover from and help solve nowadays is, again, due to a deep rooted in colonization, a systematic systems of oppression, and again, just scars, so many scars that have been left by colonization. Many people think that it's just like, oh, we were taking over land, but it wasn't just a theft of land and resources. I think the biggest piece for a lot of people, it's just such a big violation of people's bodies, people's cultures, and identities. I think that's at the root of what this big problem is. It forced a lot of people to be forcibly displaced, severed so many ancestral ties, and created systems that till this day continue to criminalize and exploit migrants such as myself. And I think that the struggle of women in immigrants' rights movements are very much deeply tied to the historical abuse of colonization. It's the legacies that shape the policies and the prejudices that we continue to fight against. When we talk a little bit about women and like who's leading this fight in immigrant justice, I think even in just 2025, this has always existed, but a lot of our communities are organizing right now, advocating for policy changes and demanding humane treatment for everybody, because I think everyone has mentioned this is an intersectional issue. It's not just immigrants, it's not just Black and brown folks, it's not just people who are LGBTQ plus, it's not just criminals, like it's not just anyone. I think we've mentioned very briefly that everyone is susceptible and vulnerable to being targeted by authorities and potential policies that may negatively impact folks. So we can see how these struggles play out worldwide in the US. Like I know I'm talking about domestic, but I think we can talk about immigration crossing borders, where we're talking about the northern border with Canada, or whether we're talking about the southern border with Mexico. Borders cross people. I think that's one thing that I love to reiterate all the time. No one is illegal in a land that was stolen from people. And I think it's a very big point that we've been making over and over again, that they're trying to pin our different communities and marginalized groups one another, making us believe that we are each other's enemies, when in reality, the enemy has always been in the forefront. The enemy has been the one who committed colonization, the person who is imposing on these systematic systems of oppression. So we know who the enemy is. And I think it's just the idea of, like we said in our line, we're trying to build unity and continue to be resistant and defiant. I am currently based out of Western New York, Buffalo, in New York, but I have a lot of family in New York City, and the immigration problem is federal. So there is quite a few community members, folks in, across the nation that I often encounter. And unfortunately, they are detained, put into detention facility that are in Batavia, New York, or any other federal detention facilities throughout the US. And again, I think it's just very important to mention that these issues have always existed. And I think, like every other speaker, amazing speaker before me has mentioned, that we are each representing here specific groups, but not to mention that these issues have always existed. It's not something that's brand new. It's something that, is simply have been more brought to light at this point. And us as women, we've been aware about it. We've known that, oppression exists, whether that be, being discriminated for being a certain race, certain education, certain background, or in this situation, immigration status. I think that that's also a big piece where people are like, well, if an immigrant doesn't have status, then, what support can they have? And I think that's where women come up in the front lines. Women are often the first ones who are advocating for their families. It's everyone. Everyone was mentioned can be a victim to this government. And, are they just going to wait till that happens to them to act? No, we want to make sure everyone understands that we're here for everyone and trying to work together. And I think you can show up for immigrants in your community. So maybe that does mean maybe you become part of a migrant accompaniment program where folks can actually get connected to families in the community who could seek support and accompaniment through everyday lives. Or maybe that looks like you support immigrant-led organizations, such as the one that I work for, Justice for Migrant Families. We're a volunteer-run organization that depends heavily on the kindness of volunteers and good Samaritans in the community. So if that's something that you have capacity to do and willingness, that's another way people can get plugged in. If that's not your forte, there's definitely other more general aspects. Folks can hold elected officials accountable. I think ourselves as being constituents, wherever you're residing, you have politicians in power. You have elected officials who are making these decisions, whether we give our input or not. So that might be another way. If you have elected officials in your area who have promised one thing or another, make sure you're holding them accountable. Make sure, doing advocacy, whether that be a phone call, reaching out to them. Because sometimes politicians will say, well, nobody in our community is complaining. Nobody's saying that immigration is a problem. Nobody's saying that IRS rates are bad. Like, nobody's saying anything. So why would we, vouch for that? And I think, again, it's just bringing up the idea that constituents have so much power, especially for folks that are susceptible to immigration detention, because they believe that because without status, they are not entitled to any rights. But when you have a community member who does have status and is advocating for that kind of policy change, it can make a big difference. Educate those around you. That's another piece, like going into spaces where this information is being shared and understand what the political climate is like and how it affects your area directly is another way to get involved. Just knowing and having information, because you never know who you might run into in public and might have this talking point with you. And it's just good to reiterate and defend yourself against anti-immigrant rhetoric. And lastly, we can definitely always center immigrant women's voices, which is, I think, a great space of what we're doing today on International Women's Day, it being a celebration, but also it's a day of resistance. We know that the fight for women's rights is inseparable from the fight from immigrants' rights, from workers' rights, from racial justice, from human dignity, for anyone's basic right to live. So today, thank you again for being here and having me today. Let us honor the women who refuse to be silenced. Let us commit to standing up with them, not just in words, but also in action. And let us never forget that that when we fight together, we will win, because we don't want to be divided. I think divided, we won't succeed, but together as a team, they won't know what's coming. Thank you.
Greetings and salutations to everybody. Assalamu alaikum, free Amal, free the land. Thank you so much, Mama Shafia, for that introduction. That makes it nice and easy. It is most definitely an honor to be amongst such powerful women from all around the world. Of course, me, myself, I am New African. I'm always going to come from a New African perspective. I practice revolutionary politics. Revolutionary politics means that, all remedies within this particular system has been exhausted. So therefore, we we established ourselves independent. We established ourselves independent back on March 31st, 1968. And within our Declaration of Independence, as one of our aims of the revolution, it says we support and wage world revolution until all people everywhere are so free. So in our Genesis, we stand and support all revolution. We stand and support all people from all around the world who are being colonized and going through genocide and all the things, right? So it's an honor to be amongst those that have similar vision and heart. Of course, we declared ourselves independent based upon our international right to human right to self-determination. We know that internationally, we legally have the right as an oppressed people to build for self and establish our own nation. When we say we're New African, that means we are a people that are a nation based upon our common historical reality here in the United States. Okay. Now, when we say we are self-determined, we have always practiced self-determination, even post-slavery. I'm talking about as quick as within 6 months of being liberated here in this country. We had our own townships. We had many of them, hundreds of them, went up very quickly. Why? Because we were the ones who had the skill sets, and we continue to have our own communities up until this point, yet, and continue to attempt to build, yet, because we are a subjugated people and we have been at war for over 400 years. A lot of our communities have been destroyed. So a lot of the things that you hear Black people talking about, they want Black people in America, New African people in America talking about they want, is things that we already had, right? We already had, but because we are at war and we are still prisoners of war, our communities, different things that we put in place to empower our communities end up being destroyed. Period. That is the reality. That is our reality. So, so when we say free the land, we are saying let's free the land here. We're right where we are in America. The Republic of New Africa has said that Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, and South Carolina are the key areas in which we want to build. And so, of course, based upon our historical reality, that is in concert with our brothers and sisters, our indigenous brothers and sisters, right? That's what we want. A lot of our people right now aren't necessarily aware that we are prisoners of war because there has been an intentional weapon, and I'm going to call it integration, right? We were forced into integration because we've been at war. We were forced into integration. It was most definitely a forced thing, over time. If you do the historical objective reality, it's a force, okay? Every sector of our society, we are under attack, physically, mentally, spiritually, socially, economically, you name it, we're under attack, okay? The women in our movement, women are natural nurturers. We are the keepers of the culture. So it is our responsibility to make sure those things that keep us strong, those the morals, the values, the traditions that keep us strong, that keep us fortified. It's our responsibility to make sure that we keep those things going in our communities, in our families. You know, you know. So it's our responsibility as the of women in the know to pour life and speak life into our people. We know that we have the power. We call it in African tradition the mother's ashe. We have the power to heal or kill with our tongue. That's the power of a woman, you know. So we have to keep those things in mind. Us being the keepers of the culture, it's important that we make sure that all those principles, no matter what principle, no matter what sect of religion or spiritual practice you come from, it's a commonality in principle. So it's really, really important for us to stay rooted in principle so that we can pass those things on to our children. Make sure that since we are the keepers of the culture, we have to make sure that and we're the first teachers, we have to make sure that we are extremely intentional with whatever gifts and talents that we have. We got to be extremely intentional and make sure that that whatever we do, step by step with whatever organization that we join, with whatever people that we link with, we got to be extremely intentional, making sure that we keep our eye on the end goal, which is freeing the land, independence, reparations, freeing all political prisoners. Like, everything we do needs to be in alignment with that. And for us here in the United States of America, my heart is heavy a lot because the psychological damage of our people here is very, very, it's serious. It's extremely serious. Okay, so those of us in the know, we have to be extremely patient, understanding, yet very firm. Okay, and stay rooted and strong in your mission and your purpose, your word and your deed. Speak truth, speak justice, live truth, live justice, and we will win. We are winning. Free the land, free your mom. I yield.
Hello, everyone. Hamidakiapi, Chantewashteanape, Chiuzapi, Tokata, Iron Eyes, and Machiapi. Hi, everyone. My name is Tokata Iron Eyes. I'm from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, and I grew up on the Standing Rock Reservation. I now live with my family in the Pine Ridge Reservation, which is about 5 hours south in South Dakota. I'm actually in Standing Rock today participating in a couple different treaty meetings that are happening. So people are reaffirming for themselves what treaty law is, how it exists in the world today. But I wanted to start off by saying first, happy International Women's Day. And in talking about the struggles that Native peoples face, yes, there is treaty law, and our treaty law is really thorough. Our ancestors, our grandfathers, took really good care to make sure that they were making very, very clear demands when the colonizers were forcing them to the negotiation table. And today, if we are following the United States' own constitution, treaties are the supreme law of the land, which would grant Native nations who did sign treaties superior land and water rights. And this is just something that, if anybody looks into, can see it very plainly. There have been many people, even in the Supreme Court, who talk about how dirty the dealings are as far as the legal precedents and the legal injustices that that the U.S. completely just ignores whenever it does any sort of business with natives. When Native peoples are talking about land back, we are talking actually about the physical land. We are talking about the places, these sacred sites that we have a God-given right to. We have creation stories that tie to physical places on the earth. These places, such as Wind Cave, which is the origin place of my people, the physical origin place, has been turned into basically an amusement park by the National Parks Association, and it garners thousands and thousands, if not millions, of white tourists annually. And yet we don't have the authority to practice our ceremonies there anymore. We have to ask the Washichu for permission to go there. And I'm really lucky I have access to this information because I was raised by traditional people. I am a minority now where I live amongst the natives. And also, in honor of International Women's Day, I want to talk about Emily Pike. And this is also why Lakota People's Law Project is so important to me. It's why I thoroughly believe in the work that my father's been doing for this organization for the past 12 years, and myself for the past 2. Emily Pike is a 14-year-old Indigenous girl who went missing in the month of January. And I think it was about mid-January she went missing. Her remains were found on the side of a road 100 miles from where she was living, and she was dismembered. They still haven't found her hands and her arms, but they have found enough to identify her. This is a 14-year-old girl. And she was a ward of the state. And this is something that's incredibly important to me because it's not being reported on in the case. But she was a Native American ward of the state. She had been taken away from her parents. Under which circumstances, I don't care. What I do care about is that the group home that she was housed in had 30 different missing persons report already before she was gone, before she went missing. The adults who were placed in control of her should be held accountable and need to do better. And the media that's reporting on the case needs to make sure that this story is being told. Lakota People's Law Project has been doing work around the Indian Child Welfare Act for since its inception in the early 2000s. And we have a report that you can find on Lakota People's Law Project that talks about how many millions of dollars are made off of these Native children who are taken into these homes, who are often put illegitimately on like antipsychotics and what do they call it? Depression medications, psychiatric medication that oftentimes they don't need, but also then, right, the emotional care and the mental health care isn't being provided on the whole either, but the pills are because it makes money. And this is something that I think is incredibly important, and it's just something to examine, right? It's not just an isolated incident. Emily Pike represents all Native women and girls. For Native women aged 15 to 25, I believe, homicide is the 3rd leading cause of death. And it's shocking to look into the different statistics that represent me. I'm 21 years old right now. I've been chased from this very place. Actually, I'm in the Prairie Knights Casino in North Dakota, and when I was little, I want to say I was like 13. I was in a car with a bunch of my other friends, and we were chased from here back to our homelands, back into where we were living in Fort Yates. We were getting chased 80 miles an hour by a truck with a gun rack on the top going through a residential zone where the speed limit's 25 miles an hour. Nothing ever happened. I feel lucky to have survived. And, Emily Pike can't say the same, and I send all of my regards to her family. And and all of those who feel a connection or have similar stories. I think it was 2022, a white family decided that they wanted to adopt an Indian kid. This is the Brackeen case. And there's a podcast on this that a Native lawyer called Rebecca Nagel does, talking about specifically the distinctions of Native people as a race versus a political affiliation. And we must remain a political affiliation, because if we are deemed a race, then they get to pull this shit where they say that it's discrimination for us to want to keep our own babies in Native families where they belong, with their culture, with their communities, with their homelands. And this is something, and this is why, as I said before, I'm a minority, somebody who was raised by traditional people, who has access to my culture, to my ceremonies, to my language. I'm a minority because of that fact, because ICWA is constantly threatened by the United States. Even as recently as 2022, they tried to say that it's racial discrimination. And it's getting scarier and scarier as we face the Trump administration. As we see, I really appreciate that we brought up birthright citizenship, because the natives where I'm from were really up in arms about the fact that it was referenced that the Birthright Citizenship Act doesn't apply to Native Americans, excluding natives not taxed. That's because there was a time when Native Americans weren't citizens at all, and the only way for a Native person to become a citizen was to leave their homelands willingly and pay taxes to the United States government, the same people who were actively genociding them. That's what that's about. And to have that legal document referenced in 2025 should be scary for everybody. If they get to question whether or not the first peoples of this place belong here, then nobody belongs here. No person who is on the oppressed side of a revolutionary struggle should be looking for monetary compensation as the means to an end here. It is not a solution to our problems. It will never feed us. It will never house us. It will never give us love. It will never make us feel fulfilled. Having agency, creating sovereignty for ourselves, being able to take care of our children, that is the solution.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you for being here.